John Neely Kennedy mocked Jasmine Crockett's intelligence on live TV. What she said next didn't just silence the room, it shook the internet. What was supposed to be a routine Monday night political roundtable turned into something no one saw coming. Broadcast live from Baton Rouge, the panel was expected to be a standard discussion. A few lawmakers, a pair of journalists, and a former public school principal turned commentator all gathered to debate a proposed federal education reform bill. Dry policy talk, nothing more. Until it wasn't. Jasmine Crockett was mid-sentence, making a point about disparities in school funding, when Senator John Neely Kennedy leaned forward in his chair. He tilted his head slightly and let out a sound that wasn't quite a laugh, more of a calculated scoff, clearly meant for the microphones. Then came the words. "Well now, Jasmine," he said, using her first name the way a teacher corrects a student. "I'm not sure you read the full text of that bill. Or if you did, maybe you didn't quite get it. Happens sometimes with lawyers who jump into politics too fast." He smiled. "Not the warm kind. The kind that says, 'I've got control of the room.'" The studio fell silent. Even the moderator blinked. No laughter. Just air thick with tension. "Jasmine!" Crockett didn't flinch. She didn't cut him off, didn't glance around for support. She simply paused, perfectly still, letting the silence stretch. A silence that, on live TV, can feel like a cliff's edge. Then she spoke. "Senator," she began, voice calm and even. "I've been a defense attorney for 15 years. I've read more legal language in a week than most folks in this room have in a lifetime. If you'd like, I can walk you through the funding clauses line by line. That's when the shift happened." She wasn't loud. She didn't need to be. Every word was crisp, deliberate, like stones placed one by one on a table. Steady, unshakable. She leaned in slightly and continued. "And for the record, I ran for office after representing public school teachers pro bono. I didn't stumble into this job. I fought to be here." Across the room, the moderator hesitated, glancing at the teleprompter, unsure whether to cut to commercial or let it ride. He let it ride. Jasmine wasn't finished. "What worries me," she said, eyes locked on Kennedy, "isn't that you think I didn't read the bill. It's that you did, and still chose to misrepresent it." For a brief moment, Kennedy's expression flickered. A flash of discomfort crossed his face before he leaned back and forced another smile. But the tone had changed. The room knew it. Everyone did. Robin Delgado, the former principal turned commentator, raised her eyebrows and muttered just loud enough for the mic to catch. "Well, damn." The audience, mostly local residents and college students, remained quiet, hanging on what might come next. But Jasmine didn't press. She didn't have to. She calmly returned to her original point. How underfunded schools in specific zip codes were being treated as afterthoughts in the legislation. She gave statistics, then stories. One about a classroom in Texarkana, using textbooks held together with duct tape. Another about a student named Trevian who had to share a desk because the school lacked furniture. That's when the atmosphere changed. The political tension gave way to something deeper. Recognition. People weren't just hearing her now. They were seeing what she meant, feeling it. By the time the moderator thanked her and moved on, the camera caught a woman in the third row, nodding slowly, tears in her eyes. As for Senator Kennedy, he didn't speak again for nearly 5 minutes. Not out of courtesy, but because he was suddenly choosing his words very, very carefully. And then came the internet. 7 minutes after the exchange, the clip hit Twitter, raw and unedited, screen recorded by a college student in the audience. The caption was simple. She ate and left no crumbs. It was casual, even funny. But the moment it captured, anything but. By the time the panel ended, the video had over 30,000 views. Jasmine Crockett, who had just dismantled a sitting U.S. senator without raising her voice, was trending. But inside that Baton Rouge studio, she didn't know. She was still sitting upright, calmly listening to the next speaker, her hand resting on a notepad she hadn't once glanced at during her rebuttal. Kennedy tried to regain footing, pivoting to fiscal responsibility and bureaucratic bloat. But the moment was gone, and everyone knew it. The moment didn't end. It echoed. Every time Senator Kennedy spoke after that exchange, it was clear he felt the shadow of it still hanging in the air. He tried to push past it, pivot, reframe. But the harder he tried, the more obvious it became that he hadn't expected pushback like that. Not in that room. Not from her. There's a specific kind of silence that follows a thorough public check. Not hostile, not awkward, just absolute. It's the silence of everyone present remembering exactly what was said and silently agreeing that nothing less meaningful should interrupt it. After the cameras stopped, the panelists exchanged polite thank yous and began to filter out. Jasmine Crockett didn't linger. She turned to leave, calm and composed, when the host caught up to her in the hallway. "Hey," he said, lowering his voice. "That was different." She gave him a polite smile. "Different how?" He shrugged, half laughing. "Different like..." Needed to be said. Outside in the parking lot, Robin Delgado hustled up behind her. "Sis," she said, gripping Jasmine's hand. "I wanted to leap out of my chair when you hit him with that funding clause. And Trevian, that stuck." Jasmine smiled. Tired, but grateful. "I wasn't trying to perform," she said. "I just got tired of being spoken to like I wasn't supposed to be in the room." And that was the heart of it. This wasn't new for her. She'd had moments like this before. On smaller stages, in courtrooms and school board meetings, where she had to remind men in suits that she wasn't there to take notes. But this time was different. This time the cameras were rolling, and the people watching weren't political insiders. They were everyday folks. People who had heard that tone, seen that look, felt the implied question mark behind their name, their title, their experience. Meanwhile, Kennedy exited through a side door, assistant in tow, phone to his ear. He didn't look angry, but he didn't look calm either. He looked like a man trying to process what had happened, while hoping the cameras missed the crack in his armor. Later that night, Jasmine sat alone in her hotel room, shoes off, blazer draped over a chair, phone lighting up with texts, DMs, even a message from a CNN producer asking if she'd be available for a segment the next morning. She didn't reply, not right away. Instead, she sat on the edge of the bed, quietly watching the clip, watching herself, the way her voice didn't rise, the way she paused, the way she held the silence and let it do the work. Seeing it, not just remembering it, landed heavier than expected. She didn't feel victorious. She felt exposed, like the moment wasn't hers anymore. It had become a symbol, and symbols get dissected. She scrolled through the comments. Most were affirming, "A master class. That's how you handle a microaggression. With elegance. We don't deserve her." But others were cruel. "She's just playing the victim." Arrogant and full of herself. "She got lucky. He held back." Jasmine tossed the phone onto the bed. That's the thing about moments like this. You can't control what people do with them. Only how you show up. She stood, poured a glass of water, and looked at her reflection in the mirror. Not proud, not shaken, Just still. But outside that hotel room, the ripple was turning into a wave. By sunrise, Jasmine Crockett's name was everywhere. Group chats, timelines, headlines. A local segment from Baton Rouge had been clipped, captioned, subtitled, and shared across every major platform. People weren't just watching. They were replaying, quoting her, analyzing her tone, her body language, her calm. She didn't flinch. She waited. Then she taught. Said it with her chest, but never raised her voice. It wasn't just politics buffs reacting. It was teachers in Pennsylvania, single moms in Arizona, a youth pastor in Oklahoma. TikTok, creators stitched the clip with their own commentary. One woman said, "This isn't just about a bill. It's about how black women are told they're too loud. Until they stay calm, then they're called cold." The internet moves fast, but this time, it wasn't chasing scandal. It was sitting with something earned. Jasmine didn't go viral because she shocked anyone. She went viral because she didn't. That's what made people stop scrolling. A morning show in Cincinnati replayed the clip. NPR ran a segment titled, "Speaking Softly but Carrying the Facts." Even The View aired it. Whoopi Goldberg nodded and said, "Now that's how you handle a condescending man in a suit." But not all the attention was applause. The other side, the one that thrives on distortion, was already at work. A popular conservative account had posted a heavily edited version, reshaped to fit a different narrative. And the battle for what the moment meant had only just begun. They called her combative, but the truth was already out. When clips of the panel began circulating online, many of them started mid-rebuttal, cutting out Senator Kennedy's original jab entirely. Stripped of context, Jasmine Crockett was painted as combative, playing the victim, leaning on identity politics. The comment sections lit up with vitriol, but the full segment had already spread too far to be undone. People had seen it, all of it. And once you've seen the truth, it's hard to unsee it. In a small town outside Jackson, Mississippi, an 8th grade civics teacher named Mr. Farrell paused his lesson to play the unedited clip for his students. When it ended, he lowered the volume and asked the room, "So what just happened here?" Zaria, a quiet girl who rarely raised her hand, was the first to speak. "She stood up," she said, "without yelling." Farrell nodded. "And how did that work out for her?" A boy slouched in his seat answered, "She made him look weak." "No," Zaria corrected. "He did that himself." That moment wasn't just playing out in classrooms. It echoed in offices, dinner tables, and group chats across the country. The conversation had shifted. It wasn't just about a bill or an insult or a panel gone sideways. It was about respect, about who gets to speak without being talked down to. Back in Texas, Jasmine's district office was flooded. Her staff, used to a steady trickle of constituent calls, casework, and grant inquiries, were suddenly juggling hundreds of voicemails. Some were short thank yous. Others were emotional. One woman left a message through tears. "I didn't cry because I felt sorry for you. I cried because, for once, I felt seen." Back in Baton Rouge, the station that hosted the panel issued a bland corporate statement. "We thank all panelists for their insight and professionalism during a meaningful discussion." Safe, intentionally vague. But the host, the same one who'd stopped Jasmine in the hallway, took to Twitter with something far more honest. "Been doing this job 22 years. Last night I watched a woman walk into a room where she wasn't, expected to speak boldly, and she rewrote the temperature without raising her voice once. That's not common. That's grace under pressure." Jasmine saw the tweet. She didn't respond. She didn't need to. That afternoon, her office manager, Leslie, knocked gently on her door. "You good?" she asked. Jasmine looked up from a stack of housing appeal folders, wearing no makeup and a soft cotton blouse. "Still behind?" she asked. 56 and counting." Jasmine smiled. "Then I'm good." Because while the internet spun itself into a frenzy, she stayed rooted in what got her there, serving the people who sent her to Washington. But the truth is, that moment didn't begin on a stage in Baton Rouge. It began long before the cameras, long before the headlines, long before anyone even knew her name. Before Congress, Jasmine Crockett was just another law school grad with a briefcase too heavy and shoes that wore out faster than she could replace them, hauling herself through the back entrances of the Dallas County Courthouse. She never once considered doing anything else. It wasn't glamorous work. It wasn't the kind that landed newspaper stories. But it mattered. In the summer of 2010, she took on a case defending a 17-year-old boy named Dante. Arrested on suspicion of auto theft. No evidence, just a vague witness, and the fact he'd been wearing a hoodie in the wrong part of town. In a dim holding room, Dante sat blinking fast, trying not to cry. "I didn't do anything." He kept repeating, like if he said it enough, someone might believe him. She did. Jasmine worked that case like it was the only one on Earth. She pulled surveillance footage, gathered school attendance records, built a timeline that left the prosecution with nothing. The charges were dropped. When the news came down, Dante's mother hugged Jasmine so hard she couldn't breathe. That wasn't rare. It was the job. But what stayed with Jasmine most wasn't the victory. It was what happened just after. In the hallway, a senior defense attorney with a name engraved on the building pulled her aside. "You made your point," he said. "But don't push too hard next time. People don't like being shown up." She blinked. "I wasn't trying to show anyone up. I was trying to keep a kid out of lockup." He smiled, the same tight-lipped smile Kennedy would wear years later. "Just saying, watch how you play the game." That line lingered longer than it should have. But Jasmine learned. She learned how to navigate the game, without playing it their way. She wasn't raised to wait for permission. Her mother, Denise, was a librarian who kept a handwritten list of students who needed help with college applications. Her father, a diesel mechanic, taught her how to stand tall, even when she felt small. And that's how she carried herself that night. Shoulders back, voice calm, facts in hand. Not because she wanted to go viral, but because she didn't know how to be anything else. They didn't have to like her. Just respect the work. "Folks don't have to like you," her father used to say. "They just need to respect what you bring to the table." But respect, she learned, didn't come easy. Not in rooms where you were treated like a visitor in your own house. The pressure wore on her. There were nights she'd come home, drop her briefcase by the door and just stand in the kitchen, wondering, does any of this make a dent? All the showing up, all the proving she belonged. Did it really change anything? And then the quiet moments would come. A call from Raquel, a former client saying she'd made it through nursing school. An email from a Pleasant Grove middle school teacher with a list of students who wanted to interview her for their civics project. It wasn't the headlines. It was the little things. That was the fuel. So when Jasmine ran for office, first state, then national, it wasn't because she craved the spotlight. It was because she was tired of watching bad decisions fall hardest on the people who never got a seat at the table. The night before the Baton Rouge panel, she spent 27 minutes on the phone with a woman in Tulsa, trying to get broadband access for a rural school. Jasmine mostly listened, took notes, asked questions. That was the work. which is what made what happened with Kennedy so revealing. He hadn't just underestimated her knowledge of the bill. He misjudged the weight behind her words. He thought calm meant unprepared. That silence was submission. That she hadn't spent years in rooms where the stakes were lives, not headlines. But she had. So when she left that panel, her past didn't disappear. It followed her and powered what came next. By Tuesday, the phones in her office were ringing non-stop. Her chief of staff, Alonzo, juggled calls with a coffee in one hand and a stack of sticky notes in the other. Line 3 is a retired superintendent from Ohio, he said, holding up a yellow square. Line 4 is a grandmother from Tulsa. She said you reminded her of Shirley Chisholm. And line 5, get this, it's a guy from Nebraska. He started crying before he even gave his name. Jasmine looked up from her inbox. Did he leave a number? Nope, just said, tell her thank you for saying what I wish my wife could have said before cancer shut her up. Then he hung up. She didn't speak, just stared at the screen in front of her, where a dozen unread interview requests waited. MSNBC, PBS, a Belgian public station. Gayle King. Going viral felt nothing like people imagined. It wasn't glamour. It was noise. A storm of voices wanting something from you. And maybe, 3 of them asked how you were holding up. The calls didn't slow. One voicemail came from a pastor in Dayton who played her clip during Sunday service. Another was from a public defender who said, watching you made me feel seen in a job that erases you. But one message landed differently. A whisper, barely audible. You reminded me that I'm allowed to speak. That was the one that made Jasmine lean back in her chair, press her fingertips to her eyes. She wasn't tired from talking. She was tired from being heard. There's a difference. That afternoon, her personal phone buzzed. It was Aunt Carol from Shreveport, the one who still called Facebook the Facebook, never watched the news, and always texted in all caps. Carol didn't say hello. I saw that clip, she said. Don't know why that man tried you. But Lord, you carried yourself like your mama taught you. I was hollering. Jasmine laughed. Thought you didn't watch politics. I don't, Carol shot back. This wasn't politics. This was a reminder. A reminder of what? That we ain't got to play small just because the room's uncomfortable. There it was again. The message that kept echoing across voicemails, text messages, emails, and front porches. You didn't raise your voice, but you raised ours. Still, not all voices were supportive. By Wednesday, the threats had started. Some were anonymous emails. Others came through voicemail, angry voices from payphones, full of flat vowels and cheap rage. Your why politics is a joke. Go back to court where you belong. You embarrassed a good man. She didn't flinch, not because it didn't hurt, but because she'd been here before. The first time someone threatened her, she was fresh out of law school, defending a tenant suing a slumlord in Garland. She remembered coming out to find a rock on her windshield, wrapped in a napkin that read, "Drop the case." She also remembered her dad driving 2 hours to change the locks himself. So no, this wasn't new. But that didn't make it normal. And she refused to let it be. That night, Jasmine turned off her phone and stepped out onto the back porch. No cameras, no comments, just the hum of a neighborhood settling in after dinner. Porch lights blinking on, ceiling fans spinning slow, the kind of silence that feels earned. She took a deep breath and let it sit in her chest. Not victory, not exhaustion, just clarity. Because no matter what came next, She knew exactly why she showed up, and who she was showing up for. The sprinklers ticked softly in the background. A faint bass line from 2 houses down pulsed through the evening air, low and steady. Jasmine sat on the back porch, the day finally quieting. Alonzo joined her, sipping from a red plastic cup. "You thinking about the CNN interview?" he asked. She shook her head. "No," she said. "I'm thinking about how many people only listened because a man interrupted me." He didn't argue, just nodded slowly. "You think that'll ever change?" he asked. Jasmine looked out at the still street. A porch light flickered on across the way. She breathed in and replied, "Not by itself." While she prepared for the inevitable second wave of media attention, one person remained conspicuously silent. The man who started it all. 3 days passed. No tweet, no press release, not even a vague quote from Senator John Neely Kennedy's office. The absence of a response was louder than any apology could have been. By Thursday afternoon, the press began circling. A political columnist from Lafayette waited outside Kennedy's Capitol Hill office, hoping for even 2 words. "Just want a comment," he said to a staffer. The aide barely looked up. "No further statements," he mumbled before shutting the door a little too quickly. But the damage was done, not just to Kennedy's image, but to the air of invincibility he'd carefully cultivated. For years he'd been the guy with the folksy zingers, the old-school wit wrapped in a drawl. Some found it charming, others rehearsed. This time it landed flat, because the country had seen the smirk, heard the condescension, and then watched him go silent when met with poise and precision. Cable news took note. On News Nation, a guest commentator didn't hold back. If Senator Kennedy can't handle a calm rebuttal without hiding behind his staff, what does that say about the strength of his convictions? Meanwhile, Jasmine did what she'd always done. Her job. She declined a late-night show appearance, turned down a podcast, known for turning viral moments into punchlines. "I'm not trying to be a meme," she told Alonzo. "I'm trying to legislate." Still, she couldn't ignore the fact that the moment was still resonating. And eventually, Kennedy had to say something. He did. Late Friday evening, his office quietly posted a statement on his Senate website and emailed it to a handful of outlets. It read like a carefully sanitized draft from a staffer trying to thread a needle with gloves on. "During a lively debate on education reform, my comments were mischaracterized by some online. I respect Congresswoman Crockett's passion and legal expertise. Spirited discussions are essential to solving the real challenges facing our schools. No mention of the interruption, no apology, just a vague nod wrapped in deflection. The internet didn't buy it. She bodied him and he dropped a paragraph written by a PR intern," one user posted. "He thought this would work in 2003. It's 2025. Another replied. Back in Dallas, Jasmine sat at a red light. Her phone buzzed nonstop in the cup holder, notifications lighting up the screen. She didn't check them. Instead, she glanced over at her niece, 14-year-old Amari, scrolling through her tablet in the passenger seat. "You see any of this going around?" Jasmine asked casually. Amari looked up. "Yeah, they're making TikToks with your face. One guy synced the funding clauses line to a gospel beat." Jasmine burst out laughing. "What? I'll send it to you." Amari grinned. "It's actually fire." There was something centering in that moment, being pulled out of the political chaos by a teenager who still saw her as Aunt Jazz before she was Congresswoman Crockett. Back at the office, her staff debated whether they should issue a response to Kennedy's statement. Some pushed for a rebuttal, others urged silence. Jasmine listened. Then quietly she said, "We're not in the business of managing other people's discomfort. Let him sit with it." She didn't need a counterpunch. She'd already spoken, in the room, on the record, with facts and composure. Anything more would have diluted the power of what already landed. But that didn't mean it was easy. The weight lingered. Even the strongest shoulders bend under expectation. Still, Jasmine wasn't done. Not close. While pundits debated and timelines spiraled, she packed her bag and headed to Fort Smith, Arkansas, where a town hall would test just how far this moment had traveled. Saturday mornings in Fort Smith usually moved slow. Coffee at noon, Myers, kids tossing footballs in church parking lots. Politics wasn't something folks talked about unless they had to. But this weekend was different. The community center on Telson Avenue was full before 10 a.m. Rows of folding chairs stretched wall to wall, filled with neighbors, elders in denim jackets and windbreakers, arms crossed, eyes sharp. Jasmine Crockett had never spoken in Fort Smith. It wasn't her district. It wasn't even her state. But the local congressman had quietly invited her after watching the Baton Rouge panel clip go viral. He hadn't said much on the call, just that some of his people needed to hear her voice. When Jasmine walked in, there was no fanfare, no stage, lights, no music, no applause, just a microphone on a stand, a water bottle on a folding table nearby. She wore a simple navy dress, low heels, hair pulled back, no press, no cameras, just people. "Good morning," she said, soft but steady. "I'm Jasmine Crockett. I'm not here to lecture. I'm here to listen, and if you'll let me, I'd like to speak too." A few heads nodded. Some murmured. No clapping. Not yet. She started with the schools. Not policies or percentages, just the lived reality. Mice in classrooms, empty lunch accounts, teachers buying their own supplies. A man in the back raised his hand, stood up slowly. His name was Earl, 73, retired factory worker. Deep creases across his face, like tree rings. "I don't usually care for politicians," he said, voice rough as gravel. "And I didn't agree with how you went at that senator on TV. Thought it came off a little sharp." The room tensed, silent. "But," he added, "I rewatched it. Twice." He glanced down, rubbing the rim of his cap between his fingers. "And I started thinking, I've been talked down to like that before. Like I didn't matter. Like I wasn't worth listening to." He paused. "And my wife. She taught first grade for 30 years. She used to come home with stories. Sounded a lot like what you said." He took a breath. "I still don't agree with everything. But I respect how you said it. You spoke with backbone. And respect." The room exhaled. Jasmine smiled, warm and measured. "That means more than you probably realize." Next, a young mother stood, her daughter clinging to her leg. Her English was halting, but her words were clear. She explained how the only bilingual aide at her daughter's school had been let go 2 months ago. "No one talked to her," she said. "She cry at school. Nobody explain." Jasmine stepped down from the front, crossed the room, and crouched to meet the child's gaze. "Thank you for telling me," she said gently. "We can't fix what we refuse to see." The conversation stretched over an hour. Some vented, others challenged. A few just listened, arms folded, still scanning. But no one walked out. When it ended, Jasmine didn't rush for the exit. She, stayed. She shook hands, wrote down names, hugged people tightly, promised to follow up. Earl found her again before she left, held her hand a little longer this time. "You come back to Fort Smith," he said. "You let us know. Folks'll show up. Folks'll listen." She nodded. "Next time I'll bring a teacher or two from my district. Let you hear directly from them. That's how it starts. Not with speeches, not with clips. With rooms like this. Honest, uncomfortable, human." Outside, the wind picked up. Clouds drifted over the river valley. Jasmine zipped her jacket and stood by her car, taking in the quiet. No cameras, no spotlight. Just a small breath between storms. But the real shift didn't happen in the center. It happened hours later, in the back seat of a rented black SUV, headed out of town. The ride was still. Jasmine sat in the back, one hand wrapped around a gas station coffee cup, the other resting in her lap. Alonzo and Tessa rode up front, the road humming beneath them. It had been a long day. A long week, but the kind that leaves you filled, not drained. Alonzo broke the silence first. "That guy Earl? I wasn't sure where he was going with that story." Jasmine half laughed. "Neither was I." Tessa smiled into the rearview. "But he landed. It." "Yeah," Jasmine said, taking a sip of the lukewarm coffee. "He did." She leaned her head back against the seat and stared up at the ceiling. The fields outside blurred past the window. She thought of that little girl clinging to her mother's leg. The school in Texarkana still waiting on replacement desks. The way a single smirk from a senator cracked something open in people that hadn't been named aloud, and then she said it. "You know what's been bothering me this whole time?" No one answered, but they waited. "It's not what he said," she continued. "It's how comfortable he was saying it. Like the idea that I didn't understand the bill wasn't offensive. It was obvious to him. Natural." Alonzo glanced into the mirror. "You think he would have done that to anyone else?" "Oh, I know he wouldn't have," she said. "But that's not even the worst part." She paused, letting her words catch up with her thoughts. "The part that really stings is how familiar it was. That tone. I've heard it my whole life, from teachers, professors, judges. It's not the words. It's the way they talk over you, because they've already decided you're not worth listening to." Tessa's voice was quiet. "Yeah," she said. "I know that tone. And in the space that followed, they didn't say much more. They didn't need to. That's why the clip went viral," Jasmine said, nodding slowly. "Not because I said anything brilliant, but because everyone watching had been talked over before." She paused. "In meetings, in classrooms, even at their own dinner tables." She turned her gaze to the window, the Arkansas fields rushing past in streaks of green and gold. "And maybe, just for a second," she added, "they felt like they finally got to answer back." The car fell quiet again. Not heavy, just reflective. The kind of silence that doesn't ask to be filled. Alonzo reached over and turned the radio down, even though it was already barely on. "You ever think about what's next after all this?" Jasmine tilted her head slightly. "Like a book deal?" He chuckled. "No, I mean, do you want to keep doing this? Fighting the same battles again and again?" She didn't answer right away, just stared ahead, watching the sky start to dim. "I don't think it's about wanting," she finally said. "It's about needing. I need to be here. Because the moment I stop speaking, someone else hears the silence and thinks it means they're alone again." Tessa nodded gently, eyes still on her phone. Then Jasmine added, "I just wish we talked more about what people are actually saying when they interrupt others." "Like what?" Alonzo asked. "Like fear," she said. "Or pride, or control. People interrupt because they're afraid. afraid they'll be proven wrong if they let the other person finish. No one spoke for a long moment. Then Tessa asked, "If you'd had 5 more seconds, what would you have said to him?" Jasmine smiled, not smug, but steady. A quiet ember lit behind her eyes. "I would have said, 'I'm not here for your comfort. I'm here for your accountability.'" Alonzo laughed under his breath, shaking his head. "You really gotta save that for your book." Jasmine chuckled, then sipped her coffee, now cold. Outside, the sun dipped behind the trees, casting that golden haze you only get at the end of a long drive. It wasn't peace, not exactly. But it was enough, for now. Still, the story wasn't over. Back in Washington, there was one more room she had to step into, one more seat to take. And this time, the room was already listening. Monday morning in D.C. was gray and brisk, the kind of morning where even the Capitol's marble looked tired. Jasmine Crockett entered through the southeast doors just after 8:30, heels clicking, a thick file tucked under her arm, expression calm but unreadable. She had a speech to give, one that wasn't for TV or retweets or viral clips. It was, for the record. 3 of her colleagues, from 3 different states, had asked her to speak on public education and equity. Her name had been added to the House floor's schedule late Sunday. By the time she stepped inside, the chamber was filling. A few lawmakers offered polite nods. Others avoided her eyes. Senator Kennedy wasn't there, of course. This was the House, not the Senate. But his name, his smirk, his voice still echoed, quietly in the corners of the room. Jasmine approached the podium, adjusted the mic, and took a breath. Then she began. "Colleagues," she said evenly, "I wasn't planning to speak today, but sometimes the moment insists on your presence, whether you're ready or not." The room quieted. "Last week, during a panel on education reform, I was questioned, not on my stance, not on my facts, but on my capacity to comprehend the very bill I was discussing." She let her words hang in the air. "I'm not here to rehash that moment. I'm not here for apologies. I'm here to talk about what happens when we create spaces where dismissal is automatic, where people feel entitled to shut others down without even hearing them out." A few heads nodded. A few more looked up. "I'm here to talk about classrooms with broken desks and outdated books, about students like Trevian, who shares a desk because his school can't afford more, about little girls who cry through math, class because there's no one there who speaks their language." The room held its breath. "I'm here," she said, her voice steady, "because I refuse to sit quietly while the comfort of power keeps silencing the weight of reality." That line landed. She continued, calm, composed, but unmistakably firm. "Some have asked if I regret my tone, if I would have changed how I responded. And I'll tell you what I told my staff. I'm not here to manage someone else's expectations of civility. I'm here to work, and work means telling the truth, even when it's uncomfortable." From somewhere in the back, someone murmured, "Amen." She went on. "For too long, this institution has mistaken politeness for fairness. It has rewarded those who interrupt and overlooked those who pause. But silence is not submission, and speaking calmly does not make you less serious." She closed her folder but didn't step away. "I represent people who don't get the luxury of being misunderstood, who speak with precision because they know they may only get one shot to be heard." She looked out across the room, not seeking approval, only clarity. "And I will not shrink to make tradition feel safe." With that, Jasmine stepped back. The room didn't erupt. It didn't have to. Some truths don't need applause. They just need to be said. No grand gesture, no swelling music. Just one woman stepping back from a microphone after saying exactly what needed to be said. A beat of silence, then applause. Not thunderous, not choreographed, but real. A few claps became many. Some lawmakers stood. A few discreetly wiped their eyes. Others simply nodded, perhaps for the first time in quiet recognition of something true. Back in her office, Jasmine slipped off her shoes and sank onto the edge of the couch. On her desk, her staff had left a note. A quote from Shirley Chisholm, handwritten in bold ink. "If they don't give you a seat at the table, bring a folding chair." She smiled, folded the paper once, tucked it into the inside pocket of her blazer. Later that evening, she called her mother. They didn't talk about the speech. They talked about groceries, about her cousin's new baby, about whether she was eating enough. The kind of conversation that brings you back to earth after standing tall before a nation. Before bed, Jasmine opened her notebook and wrote one simple line. "It's not about the last word. It's about the lasting one." Then she turned out the light. If this story moved you, share it. Because somewhere someone is still being talked over. And they deserve to be heard too. Subscribe for more stories that look past the headlines and into the quiet moments that change everything.